Hi,
Hi everyone. Today is Tuesday, November 26th, 2024. Welcome, I'm Jeffrey Morgan, and this is a talk I host twice a week to discuss my experiences on the path of soul transcendence. This offering is brought to you by the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness, with the encouragement and support of my friend John Morton, who holds the mystical traveler consciousness, the spiritual consciousness that allows us to do the work that we're doing here today. If you're new to the call, the format is simple. We'll start by calling ourselves forward into the light, which is calling our awareness forward into the light of God that's already present. Then we will chant three Anai hues. Hue is an ancient name for God, and Anai invokes a quality of empathy and compassion. Then I'm going to play a video clip from my teacher, John Roger, and then I'm going to do a reading from Kabir, and then we can talk about whatever you would like. So, with that, Ron Holnick, please call us forward into the light.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Lord God of all creation, we come before you this evening with the blessing of peace in our hearts. We stand forward in our willingness, regardless of global circumstances, to stand forward in peace and loving, for we know that those, let's call them awarenesses, are the best way present in this world to bring peace to the planet at this time. And for this time together, we give our thanks. So be it.
If it's not chanted the tones of God correctly, does that affect my going up
No,
toward
because
God?
you have a traveler consciousness on the other side that takes you up. And without that, you'd better get the tones perfectly all the time. But the traveler consciousness residing on all these levels of consciousness is the one who is pulling you up and understands that we're not going to get them, right spot on all the time. And it also, you have to remember that it is in the intent of the heart that is really what keeps charging and recharging the energy fields to go up higher and higher. And it is the intent of chanting to bring you wisdom into the karmic field of this lifetime, to make amends where necessary, to hold those who need holding, to talk to those who need talking to apologize when you have to apologize. It gives the wisdom to go do that. And so our karma isn't really going to be more than a few days old. Then you say, my apology was not to irritate you or upset you. It was to make amends and make right what could be made right. And if nothing can be made right with you, then I would just like to say my goodbyes and I'll go now. And you can walk away just really clean with that. The other person is also learning how to handle karma by how you handle yours. And so we actually become role models, if you will, for all sorts of other people by how we handle our flow of karma as we walk through it each day. And chanting the tone while we're doing that, though it is not designed for this level, the intention of the Spirit and Godness in all that does come into this level and help it. And it helps to clean it, and we feel clear. It's not that we feel good. It's not that we say, I feel clear. It's that we do feel clear. And if we look in there, it's clear. There's nothing there. And if you can sit back in your mind and go, yeah, well, there was this one thing, then when you said you felt clear, it was a lie. And usually we don't even say, I feel clear, because if it's clear, there's no reference points to say anything. I saw a lady when I was driving down the street, about 2 weeks ago, and she caused a car wreck behind her. I was behind them, and I watched her actions. She set it in motion and drove down the street oblivious that it was even happening. She was clear. Though she did set it up for the other people who had the karma. I didn't. I slowed down and just came around the side real slow. And when I sped up, I found out where she was, and I gave her all the rest of the freeway. And when I got my chance, I took off and got away from her and let her deal with the rest of the people. And so it's a matter of consciously watching, and there was humor in all this also. God, look at that lady. She's Madam Destruction on the highway today. And I'm not being negative with as much as I'm just joking about what this is, because these cars went kaboom, bam, 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 bam. And I was going, wow, this is some movie. I never said much to anybody about it because, I don't know, I guess it's just something that's when it's clear, you forget it, you go on. Maybe a week later you say, a week ago I saw this strange car wreck. And people say, well, why didn't you tell me a week ago? It was so clear, nothing happened till just now this thing happened, and I reflected on it. And then you're not even sure that you're telling them accurately what it was because it was so clear. It's the vague memory plus the drama of telling them something. We add a little bit of something on top of it so they get the idea of what happened or that something happened. And as soon as they get the idea, we drop it. And we're off to, and later on they'll say, tell me about that wreck again. You go, what wreck? The one you told me about yesterday. What about it? It happened 2 weeks ago. Okay. I say, don't you remember? No. Why not? I don't know. It's just not there anymore. It's cleared.
Okay. From Kabir. The unstruck bells and drums. The Lord is in me. The Lord is in you, as life is in every seed. O servant, put false pride away and seek for him within you. A million suns are ablaze with light. The sea of blue spreads in the sky. The fever of life is stilled and all stains are washed away. When I sit in the midst of that world, hark to the unstruck bells and drums. Take your delight in love. Rains pour down without water, and rivers are streams of light. One love it is that pervades the whole world. Few there are who know it fully. They are blind who hope to see it by the light of reason. That reason which is the cause of separation. The house of reason is very far away. How blessed is Kabir that amidst this great joy he sings within his own vessel. It is the music of the meeting of the soul with soul. It is the music of forgetting of sorrows. It is the music that transcends all coming in and all going forth. All right. What do you want to talk about today? Two Aarons, I see. Aaron Michael.
Hi, Jeffrey.
Hi.
Thank you so much for taking my question.
No problem.
I just had an interesting conversation with my auntie, and I feel something moving inside of me from the conversation. It was a hard conversation because there's some truth that she shared in her experience of me, and I guess she described me as being guarded in my relationship with her, and um, which is true. I have some kind of some walls that I built to for protection, for safety, or perceived safety, and I think that's something that I want to move to graduate from, and so I'd love some help with that.
So you're asking help with releasing the walls that you've created?
Yeah, and also what's beyond that? Like I guess I guess she expressed it as like God is in control and that I'm still trying to be in control in that way.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I guess I don't know much more, I guess, about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very common and universal experience for people to build walls when they don't feel safe. They build an entire fort until one day they realize they're in a prison, and then they don't really know how to get over the very walls they built to protect themselves. For me, I built some of those walls in my own life in relation to people that were even close to me. And I had all the justification that my mind could muster for those walls in explaining why I was right and they were wrong. And the truth is, they're often in the walls that we build, traumas that we hold in our consciousness and sensitivities and hurts that we haven't fully processed. So, in many cases, in order to dismantle those mechanisms that we've created to protect ourselves, for me, I had to face the reality that if I was going to feel safe and loved, it had to be inside of me and it had to be something that I was creating within myself. Like this is an experience of feeling safe and loved. And at one point, I just decided from now on, everyone in my presence, including me, is going to be safe and loved. But the tricky part is, even in that declaration, I still had within me barriers to hurt and trying to hold back the hurt that needed to express itself and trying to not address, in many cases, the misunderstandings that led to the hurt. what I came to discover was that all trauma exists in a false reality of my own making. And somebody would say, well, but you were hit. Isn't that a trauma? Well, yeah, the physical body received a traumatic interaction with somebody else's hand, for example. And I'm just talking about my own reference point. Does that mean that I have to hold that as a block inside of me? Does that mean that I have to relate to it as a trauma? And what I discovered is trauma exists in a particular interpretation of reality, a particular point in my own history and experience where I decided I knew what was going on and I locked in a posture and a relationship to reality. So what I started to understand is the only way to release that was to go back and see the truth of what had occurred rather than the truth that my ego had created for me. So in most cases, when there's walls like what you're talking about, there's usually a very fixed interpretation of specific occurrences that happened in our life. We had an argument and you said this hurtful thing to me and you didn't understand me or you didn't show up or you weren't there for me or you weren't safe for me in this specific instance. And then we try and do work on that. We do forgiveness. Now, the tricky part is forgiveness is always a good decision. But the tricky part is often the forgiveness will be a reinforcement of the story that we've entrenched. So we have a story that we created about us in relation to that other person and what they did to us. We have a story about how we responded and why we were justified in doing that. We have a story about our hierarchical position in relation to the other person. All of that can be in play. And so for me, the only way to clear it, the only way that I found to clear it is to let go of those roles and those positions and those righteous justifications and everything I had going. So the way I do that is often try to gain altitude, change my attitude by gaining altitude. So I start to ask to see this through the eyes of spirit, or see this through the eyes of the Christ, see this through the eyes of the beloved, to zoom out and see the situation. Now, for most people, it's very, very difficult to remove yourself from the individuated story of you, meaning I'm a that one, they're a this one, we're not the same. I have this perspective, they have that perspective. So to really zoom out into a form of objectivity where we observe and we start to not disassociate, but we start to disentangle our perception from the idiosyncrasies and the subjectivity of our perspective. And we start to just look at it as an exchange of energy, God exchanging energy with God, as it were. And in seeing that, we start to understand the perfection of what's gone on. And it's interesting because John Roger talks about the laws of spirit. And I always saw the order of the laws of spirit as almost like a recipe for release in this particular situation. The first is we have to accept that we don't know the answer. We have to go into acceptance about the state of things and that we may not be right. So there's a kind of openness in that and saying, look, I don't really know the answer. Whatever I've been doing up until now hasn't been working. I haven't been able to release this upset or these walls that I created. I haven't been able to let go. So, okay, God, please just show me something that's truer than this so I can get free. And usually with that process and gaining the altitude, we start to cultivate a deeper understanding of what really took place. So sometimes the first layer of that understanding may be just within the context of this lifetime or this perspective where you start to say, I get it. They were dealing with that karma when they were coming to me and talking to me about that. And I was dealing with this karma and I wasn't really relating to them. I was relating to me and they weren't really relating to me. They were relating to them. And we did what we needed to do to complete in that exchange. And then afterwards, I went and created a story about it. So you start to understand the interplay and the why behind the behavior And as you start to take yourself out and walk around yourself and start to put yourself in the shoes of that other person, you start to gain a profound empathy for where they're coming from, for what they're doing. It's like, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. You start to understand that people are doing the best they can with what they know. And even in that circumstance where they were so out of line and they were so hurtful in the way that they did it, they really were working from the best they could possibly do within the context of their karmas. From that loving, from that openness, from that empathy, we really can't help but feel the presence of spirit entering the situation. And we start to be breathed by spirit. We start to gain an inspiration for how this process takes place. And as we start to unblock the river of loving that flows through us and flows through all of us, once we start to see from the impersonal perfect self instead of the personal righteous self, we notice that there is an incredible enthusiasm and overwhelming energy of loving that comes forth. So for me, I look at the situation like what you're talking about. I've never really been able to think myself out of that. I've never really been able to, let's say, forgive myself out of that. But I could forgive and forget myself out of it. And what's forgetful? What's forgetting? Well, most people interpret forgive and forget means it's like you do the forgiveness process and it's been so long that you don't remember what occurred, so then it doesn't have a sting on it or something. For me, forgiving and forgetting is getting to a place where you forgot why there was anything to forgive. Like, it is so completely freeing that you come to this realization there was never anything to forgive in the first place. And all you have is this loving and this deep empathy and veneration for that person. Because how could they do differently than what they did? They did what they needed to do. So, in terms of clearing those blocks and clearing the defenses that you have in place, for me, the safety always comes from the level of my acceptance for all parts of me. The more that I make all the parts of me safe, including the part of me that is the person that I have againstness with, the more that I love that enemy within me, the safer I feel. It's like when we judge the behavior of others, our judgment becomes the prison within which we live. Because as they do the behavior and we judge it, our judgment makes it not okay for the part of us that does that behavior to exist. And so all of a sudden, there's a whole part of us that feels like it doesn't belong in God's creation. It shouldn't be. For me, the safety comes in when I know that God loves me equally, whether I'm a sinner or a saint. When I know there's nothing that changes about God's love for me, it's only about my availability to God's infinite love and mercy. And in truth, since all relationships are inside of you, you've never really created distance between you and a person outside of you. You're only creating blocks to you and a part of yourself. And the more you can embrace the part of you that is your auntie and knows that she is unconditionally and totally loved by God within you, the safer you will feel around her no matter what she does. And that has nothing to do with her behavior. And that is not me endorsing. If her behavior doesn't work for you, you can exercise preference, called go to another room, go to another house, go to another whatever. You can always exercise preference. For me, the opportunity is in the exercise of that preference, there is not even a shred of againstness within you. Peace is when we cease being against. And the grace that is extended that allows us to forget why there was ever anything but peace is the peace that surpasses understanding. And it is by its very nature your natural and complete expression, the expression of who you truly are, when you are not fettered and encumbered by the weight of your own egocentric perception of reality. When we can forgive and set free all the parts of ourselves, all that remains is what we are, which is loving. Something to work on, perhaps.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeffrey.
God bless you. All right. Aaron Maxwell, how are you?
Hey Jeffrey, I'm great. So a lot of things have been stripped away from me lately. It just seems that is happening a lot right now at this point in my life. So like friendships and relationships with people and sometimes even with physical things, but even more abstractly, like uh goals that I've been working towards, something shifts and it seems just not practical to reach suddenly. And so it's and that always this kind of thing always happens in life, I think, but it's just been happening. It seems like it's been happening a lot more intensely and more um now. And I'm wondering, there's two sides of it that I'm experiencing, which is that, on one level, it's just not very fun at all, right? It's like a sense of loss that comes with these. On the other hand, I recognize also that, it's stripping away parts that may not be of my true self, like attachments, things like that. And that just seems like a good thing in my journey as a soul. And so I'm wondering how much to try to cooperate more with this, or try to, like when I have a goal that I'm working towards on the 10% level, it's, do I keep working on that? Do I work harder on it to get it? Or do I just be kind of a monk and just let everything go? And I'm not just sure. I'm just a little obviously in some confusion, I guess, about how to navigate this. Can you help me with any of this here?
What would you say the difference between aloneness and loneliness is?
Aloneness and loneliness. The former is, well, the latter has more of a emotion. The former is more emotionally neutral.
I think I could chalk it up to like one word: attitude. See, for me, solitude is like the other attitude that's available. I love solitude. Now, of course, I have family on the call that's like, hey, but we like being around you. What's the deal with that? No, but when there's those moments when I'm alone, I just relish it. And when I'm with friends and with family, I savor that as well, if I'm smart. And sometimes I'm checking emails and putting out fires, and then I'm not smart. But sometimes within our life path, we get to a place where certain aspects of the personality ego and certain aspects of the friend karma and things like that become discontinuous energy patterns. And they start to sunset. The ego that references to the past and thinks that you're the same person that you were before sees loss. But the you that remains may not have those relationships. And I've gone through those periods as well. I had this whole thing one summer where I felt like all my friends had abandoned me. I had all these stories in my head about how they spoke ill of me or turned their back on me, all that kind of stuff. And it's really interesting. All my friends were simply doing the best they could with what they knew. And some of those people came back into my life and became even closer friends, but they weren't the same and I wasn't the same. And some of those people who stayed around through my transitions and my transformations, they're even closer to me because some relationships are going to be so central to the consciousness that, it's like you look at another person, you say, I can't think of a moment in my life when we were not friends. And you thank God for that. But at the end of the day, I've had a lot of transformations in my life, a lot of transmutations in my life, where I look at myself in the mirror and I know that I'm not the same person. It's like I barely recognize myself. It does happen. It especially happens when we're working within a movement of spiritual inner awareness that's going on inside of us. Because oftentimes the mystical traveler consciousness will set things up that you're working a lot of life patterns in a single lifetime. So you may go through phases where you're just a totally different person because in fact you are working different people karma, and that's just part of it. So you ask the question, should I just be a monk? Well, in point of fact, it's not that like you should be anything. The energy will play out the way it plays out. You're saying, what should I do with this? But it also sounds like there's an inherent intelligence in your process. And the people that are in alignment or in harmony with the energetic and the frequency that you're operating from now are going to be attracted to that. And those who are no longer in alignment with that are going to be drifting off. And at the end of the day, the person that you're going to be left with is you and the one that is inside of you. And that's who you always had, even when you had all those friends. That's who you were dealing with anyway. But oftentimes the suffering for me comes when I try to operate my life the same way I did when I was operating from a different energy pattern or a different phase, because inevitably that brings to mind a comparison. Hey, wait a minute. 6 months ago, I had all this, and this going, and now I have that, and that going. Maybe I did something wrong, or maybe this doesn't work, or maybe we can, if we can bring a newness to what we're doing, all of a sudden it becomes real easy. And we may find that we're upgraded. We may find that the things that were limitations before are no longer limitations. And the price you had to be willing to pay is cooperating with the energy and the frequency within which you operate now, which may involve the context shifting physically. It may mean your business shifts. It may mean your relationship shift. But at least from my personal experience, I look at that and I go, well, would I trade what I'm getting from this upgrade or this transformation or whatever? Would I trade that in order to have the comfort of the same friends or the same business or the same clients or fill in the blank? And the answer is always no. It always feels like it's expanding and deepening. there's always greater facets of loving available. And the loving that we are keeps expanding, keeps expanding, keeps expanding. And we need only cooperate and hold in that loving and continuously cultivate a willingness to follow the Spirit as best we can, even if it takes us through the valley of the shadow of death. It's a beautiful poem. Psalm 23.
Mm.
That's what I was referencing. For me, the more I embrace the fullness of who I am within me, the more the relationships in my life just become icing on the cake. And then I get to be real grateful for the people that I see, especially the ones that irritate me. I don't know if that helps, but that's my experience.
That helped a lot. Thank you very much.
God bless you.
God bless you.
Anybody new to the call who wants to talk? Oh, or Carla. Hi, Carla.
I don't see another hand up. Is there somebody new?
I just always like to say that just because,
Yeah,
people get shy and so I always put out the challenge.
yeah. Um, I I've heard a lot of JR seminars, a lot of listening to John talking about karma and the neutrality around it, and it is what it is, and just understand it for what it is and work through it. But I really struggle about seeing it as a punishment, like you
Yeah.
screwed up and here's the karma you got to deal with now. And I feel like, I don't know, I'd like to look at it a little more positively, even if it's kind of crappy, and a way to get through it without feeling like I'm being punished for something stupid I did.
Yeah, I think what you shared is common for a lot of folks, especially who might have been raised in more of a Judeo-Christian environment versus like I'd say in the East, the way they look at karma may be a little bit more neutral because karma just means action. So it doesn't necessarily mean bad or good. It's almost like a term in physics, like if we said inertia or if we said kinetic energy or something like that. Um, I think for me, yeah, the reason I say Judeo-Christian is because we hear things like eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, and that's what the law of karma is. It's like, well, I don't want to give my eye and I don't want to give my tooth, and it sounds very gory, right? So I think a lot of times people have even come up to me now that I think about it and said, well, why do you talk about karma so much? And the truth is, I talk about it because I think that people do have a negative perception of what it is versus just an understanding of what it is. And I think that oftentimes that negative association is what gets in the way. If so, I reframe for me, what works is to reframe karma as the privilege of completion. And for me, it's like, doesn't it feel great when your room's kind of messy, but then you just take the time and you clean it up and you get the bed all spick and span and your clothes are all put away and or decluttering. Have you ever done like a home edit where you just go through just box all the clutter, and then you walk into your living room, it's so clean and everything in its right place. I kind of look at it like that. Like, I left a messy room and I'm going home to the heart of God. But before I leave my room, I'd like to leave it nice and spick and span for whoever's using it next. So it's like there's a kind of a loving to it. There's a kind of a, that's why I talk about when I'm really on track, I'm relating to my life as if everything is simply relating as if JR asked me to clean the sanctuary at Arrowhead. It was like the room where all the trainings would happen. And if he just said, hey, could you just vacuum the sanctuary? I would do it joyfully because he asked me to do it. And it's like, would I have a very romantic notion about vacuuming? Absolutely not. But would I be grateful that he asked me and not somebody else? Of course not. Of course, I would be so proud. I'd be like, he asked me, and I'm going to be the one vacuuming. I'm the vacuumer. Hey, everyone, I'm the vacuumer in chief. I would be so proud. But the truth is, every experience that we're getting is like that. That's what the karma is. It's us being given the vacuum and being said, hey, here you go. Vacuum it up, clean it up. Now, there's a sense of obligation there because it's like you throw a ball up in the air in one lifetime and it falls down in the other, because that's what happens when you throw balls up in the air. And then you may look at that and go, oh my God, balls always fall on my head. I'm being punished. But no, you threw the ball up in the air and it came down. There's nothing personal or negative about that. Energy was originated, energy was completed. And so oftentimes we look at it as very negative. And in a way, it's like, hey, we don't teach reincarnation. We teach getting off the planet, but we also teach being mindful of your 10% level, which involves a whole lot of karma. That's just the whole deal. And a lot of people misinterpret karma from a singular egoic causal perspective. They say, I'm a me and stuff happens to me because I did something wrong, without thinking that this entire this me that I think is me, that's not me, that's not, because I'm the soul, right? This me that I've constructed is karma. The ears that you're hearing. The soul is that which is beyond all of that. It's the one that hears you hearing but can't be heard. The one that sees you seeing but can't be seen. The one that knows you knowing but can't be known. Do you see, it's outside the field of causality. Karma is simply everything that exists within a field of causality, everything that originates and completes. So if you look at it, it's almost like the Big Bang. It's like, boom, all these particles are going out, and now the second law of thermodynamics kicks in and everything's headed towards entropy, like a giant lukewarm, and then maybe it collapses in on itself. But that process in that sense isn't personal. What is personal, what is truly you, is the soul that is gaining this experience. And then that soul that is claiming its inborn Christ itself and pulling itself back up through the mystical traveler consciousness and into the ocean of love and mercy. We have free choice within a field of probability, but not infinite free choice, because if I said, hey, you got to fly right now, just fly where you're you'd be like, I can't do that. Well, part of the I can't do that are all the karmas that are set up around gravity and everything else. It's just causality. But if I say, go in and access the Christ inside of you, you can do that. Sometimes I feel like the only thing that we truly do that is free is choosing that Christ, is that act of chanting the names of God into the Tisratil and into the golden thread and going and accessing the ocean of love and mercy. And from that consciousness of the soul, we are in fact beyond the field of causality. And it's amazing how much we can clear from that altitude. Because from the soul consciousness, we can look back at all these cause and effect and all this kind of stuff, and without judgment, just go, I'm going to put love on that. And then it starts to dissolve some of its effects. But the reason I talk about karma is because there's just so many people that think that they're in control down here. There's so many people that I talk to in MSIA who think they are so in control down here, and they do the ideal say, oh, I made that happen and I did that, and grace is what happens when things happen my way, and karma is what happens when things don't happen my way. And it's just this whole egoic version of reality rather than looking at the whole thing and going, no, the only thing that isn't subject to this karma thing that we're talking about is when we are in soul consciousness, in God consciousness, and then spirit, pure spirit. Then we're beyond that field of cause and effect. But the rest of it is a structure that's designed to get us the experience that we're after when we individuated and expressed into this field of creation. It was about gaining experience, and that's exactly what we do with this wonderful thing called karma. And we have a lot of fun with that, but the problem is we get a little forgetful and a little comfortable, and pretty soon the soul's having this crazy dream. It's like you've had a dream, I'm sure, where you really thought you were somewhere doing something and you were so convinced and you were doing, and you couldn't, and then you woke up and you went, wow, that was a dream. But in many ways, we're cultivating a kind of attunement and awareness where you can be dreaming, where the soul is the awakened state, but the soul is in this dream and this process of transmigration. But the soul can wake up and go, wait a minute, I'm not all this stuff, and this is a dream. And I can wake up, and you wake up and you're already in the ocean of love and mercy. And you go, wait, what happened? I didn't go anywhere. I didn't move. Yeah, that's right. You didn't move. Nothing changed. We're already in the ocean of love and mercy. We're just in a dream and a cyclical process of engaging with the karmas and get forgetful in that process. And the awakening is not something that we earn, it's something that we claim. It's something that we're given by the grace of God. And you get to a place in the soul consciousness where the reason we say, oh, just accept your karma and the whole thing like that is I actually get to a place where I just look at the whole ecosystem of all of that. And I just go, wow, what a beautiful mandala. There's just all these consciousnesses and energies interacting together in God's creation. As soon as we know that it's not real, it's simply a process that needs to complete itself. It's not who we truly are, but it's just energy seeking its own completion. It's energy seeking its own completion. It's the privilege of completion. It's cleaning up your room. As soon as we start relating to it that way, it becomes kind of beautiful. Somebody once told me that they went to John Roger asking if they would acquire karma or something by doing something like, oh, they're going to fill out an application, they're going to fudge some information. And they said, hey, will I accrue karma from doing that? And what he told me was John Rogers said, well, you might like the karma. Right? So we look at it, we go, oh, that's bad. Oh, that's bad. I don't want karma. I don't want karma. No, what we don't want is to forget that we're already the mystical traveler consciousness. What we don't want is to forget that we're soul. So if the karma is going to entangle us in such a way that we forget that we're already soul and already God, then it could be problematic. Then it becomes a kind of idolatry where you're so worried and so obsessive over the money and the this and the that, that all of a sudden you're putting more energy and attention. You're taking more darshan of the lower form of money as a god than of God, the authentic beingness that is expressed through the sound current. But in many ways, if you really looked at your life, you would, and observed all of it, you would see just how little control you actually had. What you had was the right to choose in various situations. And the choice that we make that's just the winning lottery ticket is choosing back and working with the mystical traveler consciousness and the Christ and into God. That's the trump card. And that's the pearl of great price. And when we start to really internalize just how blessed we are, the karma is not a punishment. It's just, hey, I'm going to make my bed. I'm going to leave a little breath mint for Paul Naranjan to, because God bless him. And then I'm going to go home to the ocean of love and mercy. I'm going to clean up. I'm going to make every day of my life from here on a love note to my beloved John Roger. And every word that I say be dedicated and loving to the Christ. It's very full in that consciousness. And very generous. What could we possibly say other than thank God? If we really step into that awareness of what it means to be an initiate of the mystical traveler consciousness, what other prayer is there than thank you? I think it was Meister Eckhart that said, if your only prayer is thank you, that would be enough.
Okay, thank you.
All right, God bless you. Thank you. Great question. Great question. Thank you.
Got a lot to think about. Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, we have 5 minutes left, and we have a Richard Metz. Hi, Richard.
Hi, and again, cut it short if you have to, no problems. Thank you for doing this, number one. Number two, my question is habits. If I have what I believe that karma has been lifted, I get the learning, but I've created habits around that, supporting that karma. Are those habits karma? Or do you have a technique for helping me release habits so that I'm free of that karma in a different kind of way? Does the question make sense, first of all?
Well, so the whole structure that you described is karma. So just to be clear on that,
Yes.
so meaning like habits, movement of the body, the bowel movements, anything, that's all karma. So just
Okay.
understand that karma just means action. So
Okay.
action within the causal plane, yes?
Yes.
So when you talk about getting a learning, so it is, I've seen the mystical traveler consciousness, the Christ consciousness, start to pull the influence off of karma when somebody gets the learning. Oftentimes, it's not quite like that energetically. It feels like that, but what'll often happen is the karma will express in a certain way, in a certain level of consciousness. Your consciousness will start to express through a different frequency, and that frequency will no longer have relation to the experiences that you associated with that karma. So it'd be like if you wanted to let go of a karma of being wet and you live near the ocean, you're always in the ocean, and then you move to a desert. And then you say, oh, great, I've let go of my karma of being wet. Or did you simply move your consciousness to a place where wet is not how karma is expressed in the environment? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes. But what happens if
So,
you're, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead, finish.
so that's one clarification. The second point is what you're talking about are just different levels of karma, different levels of
Okay.
expression. So
Okay.
if we're just talking about how do I really get clear of something, I've seen people clear things in such a way that it ricochets downwards. So like you'll clear something in the unconscious that'll then have an effect on how you think, that'll then have an effect on how you emote, that'll then have an effect on identity and imagination, that'll then have an effect on how your body system works because you have less cortisol, you have like so I've seen a ricochet effect, but oftentimes people will do spiritual work or do clearing work, and all that will happen is they will pull influences off the mental level, the emotional level, and occasionally the unconscious, but it will not reverberate down to the physical level. And the physical level will still have certain things locked in, which could be neurological patterns, habit patterns, behavioral patterns. every level requires TLC. So I look at, like, in my consciousness, my 10% level, what I'm responsible for, what I'm responsible for caring for is in fact multidimensional. So that which I'm conscious of, I'm responsible for caring for and loving and devotion and all of that kind of stuff. So oftentimes in those multi-layered situations, it won't necessarily be the same branch of effect and causality that you think it is. So you'll think, wait, I cleared the mental pattern. How come I'm still doing the physical pattern? And it turns out the physical pattern has a different origin. So oftentimes when I'm clearing or working those different levels, I have to check every single one. Me, ego, me, in the story of my life will see the sum total of it and think that it's one thing happening to this one thing. But actually, what I've found is in the lower self, there is always multiplicity. So it's like we use a structure that says we have a basic self, a conscious self, a high self, but there's a bunch of other bits and bobs and pieces and different, it's more like an ecosystem. It's like all these different parts that are interacting together. And when you have an experience, your consciousness produces like a user illusion that allows you to feel like this one ego being is having this one experience. That's not actually how it works energetically. Please understand that down here, multiplicity is perceived as reality and oneness is only conceptual. So if you try to mentalize oneness, you're not going to get it. If you go into spiritual exercises and enter soul consciousness, then all you perceive is oneness, and that is in fact reality, and you know that to be reality. But down here, we perceive in oneness through an illusion field called ego that says, I am this one thing. So when you're clearing, if you clear from the perspective of this one thing, rather than zooming out and just looking at the ecosystem of energies and how they interact and simply going, oh, that little thing is out of whack, I'm going to just put some light right here, and maybe I'll just pull that thing out, and maybe I'll put the little bit of Christ right here. Then it starts to harmonize. It's more like tuning an instrument. Like you could say that guitar over there is one thing, or you could say it's 6 strings on a reverberating chamber with a long stick and frets on it. But you see what I'm saying? Like from my perspective, I would go, oh, it's a guitar and it's this one thing, and these are the only ways to mess with it. If I took that to a luthier who specializes in guitars, they're going to see an ocean of possibilities on ways to tweak it and what's actually going on because they know how to build one of those things. So they're going to say, well, what kind of wood do you use in the baseboard? And what one, like go on and on and on. And that's actually how the consciousness works down here. The lower self is multiplicity. And when you start to explore it, when we talk about worlds without end in the inner kingdom of heaven, it's not an exaggeration. Under each rock are 5 more rocks. And then you lift that, right? It's like there's always a lot going on. So what'll often happen is you create the story of this one thing happened to this one thing. You clear the influence that you think is associated with that, and you find there are a bunch of, because most of our experiences are a tapestry of influences. It is many things woven together into an illusion of one experience. And even from a karmic perspective, I might have a conversation with you that's completing a conversation that I started with my father when I was 14, and my wife in this past life, and my child when so like it just starts getting multi-layered, that you're clearing and working those processes simultaneously. One experience can in fact fulfill many, many, many incompletes in your karmic field. And if you're not pleased with the result, you really have to unpack. This is just preference. It's perfect because God designs perfection in perfection. We just don't always like it that way. But if we do have a preference to shift it, we need to look at it for what it is, not the story of what we think it is. You're only able to clear it if you get beyond the story and just see a bunch of impersonal elements that are interacting with each other, and you understand that they came together to form the perception of an experience that you think you had.
Brilliant. Yes, thank you. Got it.
And everything I just said is confounding to the mind, but I'm telling you, if you just like it from an S, when you're in spiritual exercises and when you're in from the perspective of soul consciousness and spirit, it starts to just look real simple. Like everything I just said seems like a lot, but that's why, look, clearing is great, but it can often be like whack-a-mole. But when you go into soul consciousness, all of a sudden all that stuff just starts to work itself out really rapidly.
Starts unraveling.
It starts just unraveling.
Got it.
Exactly. So it's like, what angle do you want to attack it from? I gave you the actual answer to the question, but the real answer to the question is know yourself as soul, as a living, breathing reality in your perception at all times. That will unravel the illusion. That's the more direct approach. But I've done both approaches. So please understand, there's nothing wrong with whack-a-mole. I've done both. And clearing is an amazing gift that you can give to yourself and others. And please understand the pearl of great price that we were given is that initiation and that consciousness that you can enter into that's transcendent of all the conditions that we just discussed. Okay, cool. I think I did that pretty quick. So
Yeah.
have a wonderful evening,
you.
everyone. The blessings already are. Thank you. God bless you. Hope